Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Bricks King podcast, where I'm going to bend your ear about Lego, review those amazing bricks of plastic, and discuss what is new and up-and-coming around the Lego world. I'm your minifig host, Matt. Let's build. Welcome in, everybody. Today, we are talking about Lego Masters. Again, the recap show for Season 2, Episode number 2. We got twos on the twos here. And today, I'm really excited to talk about this episode. It was one of the better episodes Lego Masters has done in the past. Going back to last season, it was something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed watching this, and I really am excited to try and talk about it and express where my viewpoints are for this lovely episode. So there was a lot that happened in this episode, a lot. We're talking about an explosive challenge that happened. That is what the challenge that they did, right? They are exploding things. They are just making things just pop and go crazy. So their build was to be able to tell a story and then take an explosive ability that they didn't do. The people that Fox hired to handle explosive stuff handled, and be able to explode whatever you wanted to explode in your build. So if you wanted an alien to explode, or you wanted a water balloon to explode, you could do something like that. However you wanted it to work. So we're still talking about the same 12 teams because nobody went home yet. So the first on the block, on the chopping block here, was Dave and Richard. Now here's the thing. I don't know necessarily if they were the first to go or not. That's at least how Fox edited the show. But if you're the first one to go, that is tough, because at least I know the build's done and stuff like that. But at least if you go in the middle, you kind of have an idea of like, okay, we didn't totally screw up. Meanwhile, when you go first or you go second, you're like, crap, we totally could have done that. We didn't do this. We didn't do that. Like, it's going to stick with you the entire time. So Dave and Richard, they are the friends that one in Philly, one in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. And their build, so the way it was is they drew a minifig and then they drew whatever element of the explosion was going to happen. It could have been dust, it could have been glitter, it could have been water, it could have been slime. And that's how that kind of stuff worked out. So what they did is they created a symphony to destroy the factory of this evil dude. The evil dude. I love the evil stuff. This good versus evil. It's awesome. And I love that it carries over into Lego Masters. Anyway, they had a really, really cool explosion. A few of the music notes were still standing. They had the violin dude where it was colored dust. So I'm going to back up a moment because I realized I probably didn't tell you specifically about the challenge. So it was basically like a triangled piece build. So it started narrow in the front and then it widened out as you moved further back. In the front, you were supposed to have your minifig that you drew by random in the front to make it look like a cinematic walk-off of an actor in some big explosion. Think of like Die Hard or something like that, and it slow-mo walk-off and the explosion going boom. Just nice and slow. That is what this was intended to be. Tell the story, make the explosion happen with your build. Cool, done, awesome. So with their violin guy was the good dude. They were trying to destroy this factory, and they had a bunch of music notes. The music notes all over the build and stuff like that. They were actually really large. And what was really neat is after this factory got destroyed, a few of the music notes were still standing. I think it was 2 or 3 of them that was still left. It just looked really cool. Like, it exemplified what was supposed to be good versus evil. The music notes are free and alive, and the factory of the bad was dead and gone. So I really liked what they did. I thought it turned out really well. Michelle and Natalie, they chose Intergalactic Girl. They had a coffee place where the evil overlord was serving decaf instead of caffeinated coffee. Oh, ha, ha, ha. Anyway, so their intent was to blast the decaf away, right? And it was kind of funny because right before they blasted this whole thing. They got Will on a joke. I can't remember exactly what they said, but after that they said, did you like that a latte? And he's just like, you know what? Here, you do my job. I thought it was really funny. But it exploded really well. There was a giant coffee cup, a coffee shop that was in the background. Really, really cool. Only a few pieces were still up. But what was intended to explode exploded perfectly. Now, if you don't remember from last week when I talked about who I picked as my two horses to go to the end, Michelle and Natalie were in there. They're going to be tough to beat. I'm telling you right now, they're going to be tough to beat. Their build looked good. It was solid. It did what it was supposed to. It's going to be tough. Maria and Philip, they got the cabaret singer with water, which I thought was interesting. Like water, Lego. I don't want my stickers around. Anyway, it was a really nice build of a landscape and then the buildings back behind it. The cabaret singer was a nice part of their build. It just kind of got lost to a certain degree, but there were massive chunks, huge chunks that flew up and just like, boom, just flew everywhere. So they did a really good job of showing, yeah, we can build. After last week where they were kind of like, down in the dumps to a certain degree, like, can we do this? Can we not? Are we good enough? Are we not? They really stepped it up and they really hit home today with this challenge. It was really, really well done. The next next pairing was Caleb and Jacob, the young twin brothers here. And they had Rocket Boy with glitter. So Rocket Boy is defending the moon from these alien invaders, which was really, really cool. Because what you had is you had UFOs that were there. I love the UFOs because they were built up on black Technic frames to make it look like they were floating above the moon. It was super cool. They were just chilling up there in the air, and their explosion was awesome because what ended up happening is the UFOs just went boom, and they just exploded perfectly. It was great. It was really cool. The surface of the moon build was really cool. It was just a nice build overall. When we get to the top two and the bottom two, we'll talk about them some more. So on to Moto and Paris. I got a chance to talk to Moto on or Moto. I don't know if he goes by Moto or Moto, but whatever. On the Beyond the Brick quarantine cast stream on Tuesday last week. So that was kind of cool to chat just hear a little bit. He's a really smart dude. Anyway, I guess you have to be as an engineer. They had the goddess of water to break this giant brick built dam that they did in the back, and it was a really neat idea. It was a really cool build. It really looked cool, and it just worked perfect. So when the explosion happened, the center of the dam collapsed and just broke apart. It would be like you would expect if you were watching a sci-fi movie of some kind, some natural disaster, and the dam got hit by a meteor and it just exploded in the middle and all the water comes out. It was perfect. It was perfect. The build of the landscape with the dam, it was awesome. It was so cool to see. It was full of detail. They really did a good job. So moving from last week to this week, they definitely took steps up the ladder of, yeah, you're going home soon versus now you're going to be here till the end. So they definitely moved up on my list. Susan and Jen. I had questions about Susan and Jen last week. So Susan and Jen this week, they drew the wizard and they drew glitter. And they had their wizard, basically a potion that turned a spider into a mutant spider, this giant spider. It's almost like the spider that I did on the review for Monkey Kid, the giant spider queen spider who's freaking huge. Anyway, the spider dies tragically. But it was kind of funny because it just went bam and it just split open into oodles of pieces. It was really cool to see. But the problem is a lot of their build was still standing. And I like the idea of it, this evil spider and stuff. Some people are like, oh, spiders in my territory. I don't mind spiders. But what was left standing, I was like, oh, okay, at least you killed the main antagonist of this story, between the wizard and the mutant spider. So that works. I'm okay with that. I don't have too big of a problem with that. So Lauren and Brian were next. Lauren and Brian, they are the siblings. And they had the Ladybug Girl. Oh my goodness. This build, if I saw this build at a convention, I would have probably taken 30 pictures of it in different angles with different things in front of me, because not only was the scale perfect, the building techniques were awesome. The story behind it was fantastic. So what they had is they had an evil frog dude on a lily pad in this pond. There's some reeds poking up around it, which is really cool. The little reeds that you see in ponds and stuff like that, cattails, that kind of stuff. Super, super cool looking. It set the scene. Like, I paused it and I'm like, I feel like I'm at a pond right now. Anyway, so their Ladybug Girl is using a pollen bomb with the lily pad to destroy this evil frog. And here's one thing that I noticed before we get to the explosion. One of the things that I noticed when I paused it and I'm watching and I'm looking, the frog's tongue, pink, is built. They built it, I think, out of 2x4 bricks to a certain point, and then they took minifig legs, pink minifig legs. They took like 4 or 6 of them, 2 rows of them, and they just attached them to each other to be able to get the bend of the tongue at the end of the tongue. It was so stinking cool. It was ingenious. It was something that I had never even thought of. Like minifig legs to be able to get a certain angle? No way. And I don't know what the degree of the angle was, but it was perfect. It turned out really, really well. Anyway, so I was just like, I was smitten by that. I'm smitten by the frog. I'm smitten by the legs being used backwards, upside down as a way to get an angle of the tongue, which was super awesome. And then their explosion happened. And that frog went to kablooey. There was nothing left of the frog. The thing just disintegrated. I don't even know if there was any plastic left. Maybe some ashes in the way that it blew up. It was perfect. It was so wicked the way they managed to be able to build it so that it was able to break apart. Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, you're not just trying to build something that's solid and holds together. You want to build it so that when a charge is placed in there, about a quarter size charge, it just goes kaboom and just splits all the crazy can be. And that's exactly what happened. Really, really cool build. So the next ones were Randall and Sarita, and they had the Minotaur Warrior with dust. So they had this villainous wizard. By the way, it was a really nice setup in the backdrop with castle walls. I really liked the color. It wasn't like gray or anything. I think they were red and yellow, which was really nice. It really gave some color to it, really some pop, some different feeling to it. Anyway, the wizard that they had, this bad dude, this evil monstrosity, he gone. There's nothing left. There was nothing left. There was a lot that was still standing. The design of their build was nice. The story was okay. It was average for me. It wasn't up here. It wasn't down there. It was about in the middle, where, kind of where they finished last week is kind of where they are this week. So they're definitely going to need to pull it up to a certain degree and be able to reach that top end or stay near the top, if they're going to continue to stay around. I'm going to take a quick break and we'll be back after a moment. And Jack and Dawn last week, they did the Kelsey's Butterfly. This week, they chose the Jewel Thief, randomly, obviously, and the glitter. And what they chose to do is they chose to do the Jewel Thief as like a Western type motif where they had a backdrop. There was a jewelry store. Think of like an Old West movie, like an Old West town. That is what it felt like. But here's the thing, and Amy brought this up as well, one of the judges. Amy said there was a lot of empty space in the front of the build because, like I told you, it kind of goes back in a triangle. So you have your minifig that is in the front, and then as it goes back, it widens out to corners. It's basically a giant slice of pizza, if you want to think of it like that, just a giant triangle. And there wasn't anything between the minifig and like the very back. It was very naked. It was very bland. And I understand where the street went through and stuff like that, but it needed to be more built up, and it wasn't. But the idea behind their build was, the Jewel Thief this stuff is going to be blowing up the jewelry store and stuff like that. And not much of it blew apart. Not much of it blew apart. Some of it did, some of it didn't. I think the problem is they built it a little bit too snug. They made everything a little bit too tight versus some of the other teams. If you pause and you go back and watch how they're building some things, there's a lot of hollow stuff to this. And you got to remember, you're placing these tiny charges. They're not. The demolition specialist or whatever you want to call them is. And I just don't think they thought enough about it to be able to think through on how that's going to work. Steven and Mark, they built a plant monster. Their chosen thing was water. Of all the little creatures in the whole episode, it was super cool. They had a bunch of them that were brick built. These tiny little creatures. It's like if you were to land on this little random planet and you see these little like poof ball creatures everywhere. That's kind of what you're going with here. And I loved how they used all their space from the front to the back. They used all of it. The head of this monster was so slick looking. It looked like an angry watermelon with teeth, and it just went kaboom, and it was perfect. There were things that flew everywhere. I mean, everywhere. I'm sure, even though they had safety glasses on and goggles, I think is what they had on, whatever the case, I'm sure there was stuff that shot 50 feet across the room with the way it was constructed. It just blew to pieces. It was a really cool build. Last week was a really cool build with them with the Viking ship. This was really cool as well. So Zach and Wayne, who currently hold the golden brick, who won last week on episode 1, they chose to do an alien and slime. And their huge alien monster thing was this big giant orange thing that almost kind of like it had tentacles as it was coming out of like a planet to a certain degree, like on the surface of a planet. But what I did notice is their build with the arms and stuff like that, the build to a certain degree, it was very reminiscent of last week. Like I felt like they took their dragons and modified them, added a giant bulbous thing to this monster and just changed colors a little bit and added some extra arms to it. The build was nice, but I'm going to need to see more. I think they're definitely going to have to, they did well, but I definitely think they're going to have to be able to do more moving forward, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so the idea of their monster was super cool. It was totally annihilated, just destroyed, nothing left, perfect destruction. The only thing that I want to see is some other building type techniques. I saw too much of the same kind of thing with the arms this week as I did last week with the dragons, aside from movement. So Tim and Zach were the last one to go. They're the father-son combo from Michigan. They had the mad scientist and slime. There were vials. I think they had 2 or 3. I think it was 2 vials of elixir that was used with this giant industrial complex build of a backdrop. Was really neat. And inside of this industrial complex build of a factory, they had a sign that said "Pow." Like think of like the old Adam West type Batman stuff where "Pow, boom, kapow," that type stuff. And they had that behind there. And what they were hoping for is the front wall of this factory would explode, either fall down or blow apart. And you would see a pow back there. And the mad scientist, whatever would have happened. Unfortunately, when everything went off, it didn't. Like stuff went off. Things went flying. Not near enough went flying. There was a lot left standing. And then, like Jamie said, you still had this mad scientist that was trying to blow up this factory, and the factory's still standing in the background. So it didn't look well for the idea of what was going on. So it was kind of problematic. Wasn't the best. Definitely not their best, time in front of the camera, this challenge, this whole game show thing. Hopefully moving forward, it'll improve. But it was neat to see. The idea of it was cool. The vials just disintegrated. It was really nice. So as always, every week they're choosing the bottom 2. They're choosing the best 2. And your best 2, you had Lauren and Brian, remember, siblings. And you have Dave and Richard. Dave and Richard were the first ones to go. It's hard, man. It is really hard to set the tone. You set the tone and you think we're way up here. And then somebody comes in 3 builds later and you're like, crap, we're at the bottom or we're in the midfield. What else is going to happen? So they did well. They were in the top 2. Lauren and Brian were the winners. They were chosen for the top 2 this week, which of course, I don't know how they couldn't with the way that frog build was. You just had to choose them as the winner. It was perfect. The way between the explosion and the build and the story behind it, it was perfect. The bottom 2, this was tough. This was tough because I don't feel like there was really a bottom 2. There was more like a bottom 4. I know somebody's going to be like, what is wrong with you? I'm just being honest. So the first bottom 2 were Tim and Zach, the father-son out of Michigan, who the Powell sign didn't appear. They were touting this like, you're going to see this, and it didn't happen. And then Jack and Dawn with the Jewel Thief. So those were the 2. It was a tough decision. I can't even imagine the judges having to sit down and say, you know what, you're gone or you're gone. And it's not like they're saying, bye, pack your crap and get out. It's a very heartfelt, we really liked your build. We really liked what you've done. You've done so much for this competition, but I'm sorry, you're going to have to go home now. Like, how do you tell somebody that has put in all of their effort to be on the show and then they go home? Like, that's hard. The second episode in, like, you don't even get to see what is going on with the rest of the stuff. You're gone. So here we go. The team to go home was Jack and Dawn. I know. But here's my thing. Did I or did I not tell you last week that they are going to really have to step up their game or they're going to be gone? They didn't step up their game, and unfortunately, they're gone. I know that's sounding crude, and somebody's probably going to send me an angry email, an angry elf message. What? You're such a jerk. How could you say such a thing? I'm just being honest. I'm calling it for what I'm seeing it. I'm watching it as quote unquote TV because I'm not a big TV person, but I'm watching it not for necessarily entertainment. I'm watching it for what it is. I'm watching it for the Lego side of this. I'm watching it. I'm picking it apart. I'm watching it. I'm looking at these builds saying, yes, you have it. No, you don't. And maybe I'm not the one to be the judge, jury, trial, executioner type thing going on here. But what I saw last week was not enough. And what I saw this week was not enough. And that is the reason, unfortunately, they went home. Tim and Zach, they knocked it out of the park last week. This week, got some problems. But they're not the only ones. The ones that I was concerned with last week, Susan and Jen. Susan and Jen are not long for this world, unfortunately. I just don't see them being able to stay afloat because of their builds, because of what is going on. If there was a top 4, they were in my or not top 4. If there was a bottom 4, they're in my bottom 4. Absolutely, they're in my bottom 4. And it's one of those things, unfortunately, there just wasn't enough shown. There just wasn't enough shown. So they get a reprieve for next week, and they weren't the only ones. I would have chosen Randall and Sarita this week as well. Those would have been my bottom 4. So I nailed 2 of them for sure. And, next week, we're going to be in a whole nother dose of challenges, a whole nother shebang of craziness. And you got to be ready to go. You got to show up. You got to put out your A game. Go big or go home, right? That's the motto. Go big or go home. And you're going to have to go big or you're going home. And from here on out, there is no reprieve unless you have that golden brick. And guess what? You're not prying it away from Zach and Wayne. Maybe they weren't the top this week. They definitely didn't appeal to me as being the top. They didn't appear to be as being the top. They were just kind of, I'm the top half, but I'm definitely not the top. I need to improve moving on next week. So yeah, sad to see them go. Really sad to see them go. The episode was nice. It wasn't so over dramatized this time. It was kind of cool. The silly jokes and puns and stuff like that Will Arnett was throwing out there, but that's what you expect, right? He's an actor. He's a comedian to a certain degree and that kind of stuff, that quick-witted, maybe not even quick-witted, but just that quick humor, those quick one-liners done. I don't know how much somebody's talking in his ear, but either way. So yeah, Jack and Dawn are gone. If you're curious to know what they had to say, tomorrow you guys need to listen to the interview that I did with them this week. And every week, anybody that gets booted out for the next, 11 weeks, whatever it is, we'll bring that interview to you and you guys can listen to what they had to say from a panel of different fan media that ask questions and stuff like that. So it was interesting, and I implore you to check it out tomorrow. I think you guys will really enjoy the episode. I think there's a lot to be gleaned from that episode. And again, I kind of tend to be a little more, silly is not the right word, but I tend to stay away from the boring questions to a certain degree because nobody wants to listen. Tell me about your favorite Lego brick. Not most people want to hear about that. Some people do. I want to hear about some of the silly stuff. Like, who are you more afraid of? Are you more afraid of Jamie or Amy? Because for me, it's definitely Jamie. Jamie scares the crap out of me, dude. Just, there's something about his demeanor and his perfection with Lego that scares the crap out of me. Like if him and I were in a conversation in a room, just the two of us, and we're building and stuff like that, I'd probably throw it up and be like, I'm done. I can't handle this. I have too much anxiety. Start shaking, start going to town like crazy shaking. Anyway, so check out that episode. It's a really good interview with Jack and Dawn, and you actually will learn a lot more than you probably thought you did about the competition, but specifically about them as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll be back next week with another wrap-up recap of episode number 3. And as always, I'm your Minifigure host, Matt. Let's bet on it.